Welcome, everyone. We are very, very glad to see you here this evening, finishing out our first day of sPark 2021. It's great to see you all. I know we have more folks joining us as we begin our session here, but I want to kick us off by welcoming you to Student Startups. Be sure to take a look at our virtual program if you haven't yet, to be able to see the full bio of each of our speakers tonight and learn a little about the organizations that they lead, although of course that's what they're going to be telling us about tonight. So in brief, I will tell you that we are going to learn tonight about SEAver, Sani, and 321 Coffee. And we have a moderator who will guide our conversation, Bejul Shah from the class of 2024. Thank you very much, Bejul, for doing that. So we invite you to share questions in the chat throughout, and Bejul will take it from here. So I'll turn it over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Bejul, and we're just going to start by giving each organization the chance to introduce themselves. So we can start with 321 Coffee, go to SEAver, and then Sani.
Awesome, thank you. My name is Lindsay. I'm here with Liam and Michael. The three of us run 321 Coffee, which is a coffee shop located here in Raleigh that's really built on neurodiversity inclusion. So we focus on employing people with disabilities and showcasing what they can bring to a company, to a workforce, and to society.
Hi, my name is Noah. I'm here with Shannon. We are the co-founders of SEAver. Like Receiver, because that's a lot of what we do. We develop technologies that help accelerate environmental justice, specifically in the area of monitoring air quality in underserved communities.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rithika, and I'm a current sophomore and part of the class of 2023. I'm majoring in fashion textile management, and I'm the co-founder of Sani. Sani is a South Asian inspired fashion brand that my sister and I started in 2017 with the goal of increasing the visibility of South Asian craftsmanship and techniques. And we create culturally inspired clothing and accessories.
Awesome. So I'm just going to start asking some questions to the panel. The first one being, how have you leveraged the Park community in starting and growing your company? And we can just use the same order.
Awesome. So we were sort of based in the Park community. We started this, Michael and I, our freshman year. We're both seniors this year, and sort of came to school, had the idea, didn't have any prior business experience, any coffee experience. And so it really started with legit a lunch conversation of saying, I'd love to start something like this, and other Park scholars saying, I'd love to help. And just luckily a lot of people willing to get involved, to help where they can. And we've been able to leverage the other students, the alumni, the Park staff, the connections, and we've seen a ton of support, and that's what's really fueled a lot of the growth that we've seen.
Yeah, I think our answer is kind of similar. The whole thing that started SEAver was an idea I've been noodling on since like middle school, but actually coming to college and coming into the Park program, I was able to like find both kind of indirect support, like talking with members of the Park staff through what do I do with this idea, and then working with Shannon, working with other parks to actually build and grow this organization.
I think I'm a little different from Lindsay and Noah because I came into NC State with Sani, but what happened with that is that I felt like Park really pushed me outside of my comfort zone, which is something that I really appreciated. Actually, one of the things that they did that I can't forget is they made us get a faculty mentor, right? And my faculty mentor has been one of the best mentors for Sani, hands down. And that's just because Park constantly challenges you to go beyond what you're comfortable doing. And they're always there to push you to take that extra step. So for my business, for school, that's all been very, very useful.
And kind of leveraging off that last question, what has been the best resource at NC State for starting your business?
I don't know what Lindsay and Liam would say to this one. I would think it's been the NC State entrepreneurship community at NC State. So we definitely work a lot with different people in NC State entrepreneurship. Louis Sheets and Gabe Gonzalez, to name two people that have been like super helpful to us throughout our journey of starting 321. We did the Andrews Accelerator last summer, and actually we're part of that with Sani, so that was a super cool experience. And the Andrews Accelerator at NC State is a program where they typically work with, I think, like 4 to 5 companies and provide some grant funding to them, along with bringing in like different speakers from the Raleigh community and sort of just like the broader like NC State community every week to talk about like different aspects of a startup, raising money, all of like that sort of stuff. I think we were able to take a lot away from that and get connected to a lot of great people as a result of that program here at NC State.
Yeah, I would definitely echo the entrepreneurship program in Garage has been really great and kind of has helped us navigate a lot of the business and legal side of things. But another really great resource has just kind of been the broader NC State community. Of course, like the park community has been amazing. We've called on so many of those people, but a lot of the work SEAVR does is based in environmental justice and kind of some social issues that Noah and I don't have as much experience with. And so being able to go to professors and students who are in sociology, who are in environmental science, and kind of understanding their perspective, in addition to being able to go to professors in electrical engineering or computer science, has kind of helped us put those two things together so that we're not only making technology that's really cool and really innovative, but that actually helps people. And so that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, and I would just echo what they just said, because entrepreneurship department has been huge, but for Sani, the College of Textiles has also been huge, and being able to count on the resources over there. And another thing I'll add is also the entrepreneurship department, like Michael said, has the Andrews Accelerator, but then there's also like mentorship meetups that are great to just chat with people about different problems that are arising in your business. Or Lulu eGames was a great opportunity for us to get some non-diluted funding. So the resources at NC State are amazing. You just got to tap into them.
Cool, thank you. And this is a question that we can't avoid. How has the pandemic affected your businesses?
Yeah, so I can talk about this on behalf of 321 Coffee. Essentially, I think the pandemic had a couple of good and bad ways of affecting us. You know, we were looking at moving into a storefront during the summer. That's really how we were looking to grow. And the pandemic really put a pause and end to that temporarily. And so we had to figure out a way to continue and grow. And we looked at pivoting towards roasting our own beans, which is something that we had never thought about beforehand. And I don't know if we would have really crossed that road anytime soon if it weren't for the pandemic. And roasting our beans has been a huge revenue driver for us. And it's going to be a huge part of our plan moving forward. So, you know, there are obviously some cons, but also some great benefits in the way that it's been a challenging experience, but has made us better because of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've struggled with in SEAVR is, well, kind of an intent, like a hard to quantify resource, which is connections to actual community organizations. It's already, right, these organizations are already kind of overstressed for time and resources. And when COVID hit, that made it much more difficult to kind of sustain connections and contacts with these. But, you know, it's important to have those so that we can actually deploy our technology in a sustainable, effective and respectful manner. I think kind of the silver lining of it all has been kind of similar to 321 Coffee in that it's an opportunity to say, all right, so what can we do? Let's focus on that in the meantime. So we focused a lot on our deployment of monitors on NC State's campus, which has taught us a lot of very important technical lessons that we wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Yeah, the pandemic was pretty crazy for Sani. In February 2020, we launched on Rent the Runway, which was really big for our business. But then 2 weeks after, the pandemic hit and formal wear kind of became obsolete. And that was our main product. So my sister and I were pretty stumped on where do we go next? So when we really got down to the core of like what we could do, we realized that our whole business had been around increasing the visibility of South Asian fashion. And we had done that with formal wear, but there was so much opportunity to do that with other clothing categories. And we had thought about exploring it. But the pandemic kind of accelerated us into that exploration. So we released masks and loungewear. I'm actually wearing my loungewear right now. And the loungewear has done really, really well for us. And if you asked us in February if we would have loungewear as a component of our business, I would probably tell you, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? We make like formal wear, never. So the pandemic kind of forced us to go outside of our comfort zone, but now we're really finding a way to work casual clothing categories into what we're doing at Sani more and more. So it was definitely a learning experience, but a good one.
All right, awesome. And so going back to the very beginning, how did you guys know what business you wanted to start? And to add on to that, what was the hardest part of starting a business in college?
Yeah, so for us, we never really started it with the goal of like, oh, let's launch this company, let's grow to have a bunch of employees. Honestly, we sort of started it with like, oh, wouldn't this be like a fun thing to do on the side? Like freshman year, Michael and I were both in engineering. I know I personally like wanted to go to med school. Michael was really passionate about clean water accessibility. And so like starting companies and coffee was not really on the radar. And so I just had the idea of wanting to create a place where individuals with disabilities could be involved and really gain that professional work opportunity. And so our beginning days were super scrappy. It was renting folding tables from Tally. We were practicing brewing cold brew out of the Brigade kitchens. But it was all this like, let's just see what we can do and put something out there. And over time, we found out we were onto something. We had a lot of support. We did one event and it was easier to do the second and then the third. And we had people offering their help with commercial real estate or sourcing an espresso machine. And we quickly fell in love with this entrepreneurial process of building something and seeing that tangible output. And so that was sort of what led to this really big pivot for us as a team, which probably was one of the biggest challenges of making that decision that no, this isn't just going to be something that we do in college on the side, but this is going to be something real. We want to take on employees. We want to open a coffee shop in downtown Raleigh. We want to go full time with it. And having the confidence to say that was terrifying. But we've had a lot of help in the process.
I think for Seaver, Noah and I didn't really start out saying we wanted to make a business. As Noah kind of alluded to earlier, he had this idea since middle school, and we had gotten around to our CEIs, and so we did what would eventually become Seaver as our CEIs because we're both passionate about environmental justice and we have some technical skills that can maybe be used in this area. And as we kind of got almost, well, our grand plan was to have the whole thing finished by the end of our CEI, and obviously that did not happen. But at the end, we kind of realized, oh yes, thank you, Eva, for putting what CEI is. But at the end, we kind of realized we need a more formal organization in order to sustain this work, and then also to kind of lend credibility to ourselves as we go into these other communities and kind of gather people around us who aren't just students. And so that's kind of where the whole business idea came from. It was just more of using the business framework to further the mission of what we were going to do, not necessarily going into it saying, I want to start a business, what can I make? And I think the hardest part of starting it in college is feeling like maybe, at least for me, is maybe feeling like you're not the most qualified. Like, yes, there are people who could make circuits way better than me to do air quality monitoring. But at the end of the day, I'm the one doing it and I really care about this mission. And so I just have to keep reminding myself and keep kind of growing in my own skills in order to kind of push past that and really get the job done.
Yeah, for me, I was the overeager freshman who came in and I was like, I'm going to do a double major. I'm going to major in comp sci, fashion, run Sani, and still be successful. And little did I know that time goes really fast in college and you barely have any time to do anything. So I think what was huge was just figuring out time management, right? I had never been in this kind of environment where there was like opportunities everywhere and I like had to say no, otherwise I would go insane. So really with Sani, it was about finding that balance of making sure I prioritize my school, prioritize my business. And I think what was huge about that was also having a co-founder, my sister, who helped me through that and was there to pick up slack when it was exam week and I didn't have time to help her with whatever was Sani related. So yeah, that's just been a learning process along the way, but I think definitely figuring out that sweet spot between making sure you're still doing well in school and taking care of your business can be really difficult, but it's doable.
Cool. And so now for a few more specific questions. Maybe we could hear from the folks at 321 Coffee about how exactly you have worked to incorporate neurodiverse individuals into the workplace.
Yeah, so we incorporate neurodiverse individuals we try to incorporate them into everything that we do. So when you come to 321 Coffee, we have neurodiverse individuals that are working the cash register, the espresso machine, serving drinks, sort of running the whole operation at the farmers market that we currently have. That's definitely how I think we'd intend to continue running things at future locations and whatnot. On top of that, we try to incorporate neurodiverse individuals into a lot of the other work that we do. So if we're going to give presentations about 321 Coffee, we'll try to work with our staff on having them help us with the presentation and giving that presentation and speaking about 321 Coffee and sort of learning other skills that go outside of just being a barista and working at the shop. We're really trying to work with individuals on developing very wholesome skills so that if they're interested in, they could go and take those skills to another employer or whatever that may be for their own path, and sort of have something that they can say, hey, look, I did this at 321 Coffee, I could do this for you. I think that's really the impact that we're trying to make, is to try to get more people to realize that these individuals could be huge value adds to their company.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is that we've even looked a little bit into having some of our employees even serve as supervisors. So we've identified a couple of our baristas who we think are really good and have taught them and helped train them in ways of, overarching, keeping track of orders and being able to make sure everyone's on task. And again, those are just really good skills to be able to go and show future employers if they're looking for other jobs, to show that they are able to multitask and watch different positions and supervise. And kind of like Michael mentioned, we're all about giving that holistic experience and not just becoming really good baristas, but becoming really good employees with a lot of different skills that they can carry on in new opportunities.
And Shannon, I know you touched on this briefly about technical skills. So maybe you and Noah could talk briefly about some of the challenges in finding volunteers with technical skills when you were working.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, there is a certain kind of set of skills that is nice to have when people are volunteering with Seaver, but we've had people who've had no programming experience come in and start doing machine learning work for us, and obviously there is a learning curve to that. But it has forced me to become better, kind of helping people go through this process. We have had some grad students volunteer with us. But I think on the technical side of things, it's not super hard to find people that kind of have the skills that we need, because a lot of the skills are quite transferable. Obviously, we're both in very technical majors, and so you can usually, ask your friends or a professor knows someone. But I think one of the biggest struggles for our volunteers right now is finding people who are interested in that kind of sociology and kind of the kind of respectful service aspect of Seaver, because that's something that we're really trying to grow. Noah, do you have any other perspective on this question?
Yeah, I think you covered most of it there. I think broadly, the lesson we've learned, which I think is applicable to just finding volunteers, finding people to work with you in any context, is making sure to set expectations really clearly. I think in tech that becomes especially important because there are questions of who owns the intellectual property. And this was something Shannon and I both come from a kind of research oriented experience where it's what do you mean intellectual property? I'm gonna make a poster and then publish this eventually. But in a kind of tech entrepreneurship space, it's no, we need to make sure we have all of the proper legal documents signed and make sure the person working with us understands what's happening and that we understand what's happening. So kind of setting expectations like that, we found has been really key and really helpful once we do it right.
And I see there's a question in the chat that we'll get to in just a moment, but maybe Ritika, you could speak on how you knew you wanted to start Sani and kind of the beginning steps you took after you decided on that business model.
Yeah, so Sani started from a personal problem, and it actually started when my sisters and I were going to an Indian wedding. And for those of you who don't know, Indian weddings are usually 3 days. And for 3 girls, that's 9 outfits. So we kind of grew out of all of our own outfits, but we were at this age where we cared about what we were wearing now, right? Like we didn't want our mom to just pick out an outfit for us. Like we wanted to feel confident in what we were wearing. So the way we shot for those outfits, since we were in the US and didn't have time to go to India for anything, was travel to major South Asian hubs like Edison, New Jersey, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte. We WhatsApp video called my grandmother in India to see if she could video shop for us. And we also ordered something off of eBay, but it did not turn out like what it showed in the picture. So basically, we ended up resorting to borrowing friends' outfits and wearing old outfits. And so when we dug into it more and talked to other people, we realized that a lot of first and second generation South Asian Americans were settling for subpar designs and a subpar experience. So there was a problem here that we could fix. But we never thought of it as this full-fledged company that we were going to start Sani with. We were like, okay, here's like a little side hustle we can do. Let's create 15 outfits, all in our sizes. So if the business fails, we have clothes for days, and let's see if they sell. And so when I say that part, like obviously there was a lot of steps, like it wasn't just like the 15 outfits appeared out of nowhere. But that's basically where the idea for Sani started. And it's obviously developed a lot more from that Indian wedding personal pain point section, but we kind of use that to be the anchor of like what started it all.
Cool. So I think there's a question in the chat by Hampton Clark. And they're wondering, are there any resources that you wish you had from Park and or the university to better support your ventures? And we can start with 3, 2, 1 coffee again, if that works.
Yeah, one thing that comes to me is, and I think like NC State entrepreneurship is starting to like roll something out like this, but just a platform to connect with other student entrepreneurs, to like and alumni, to see that like this is a path that's done and like it can be you to make it work. Like I think that NC State and most universities do a really great job at highlighting like alumni who are now working at like Google or Cisco or any of those like really big name companies, but you don't always hear about the ones who sort of went on their own path. And that can be a little intimidating because you don't know, like, is this a real thing that I should consider? Like, am I being dumb for considering this? And I don't know, whenever you see somebody else doing it, you assume that at least somebody else is dumb enough to think it's a good option. But I think we've all seen so much support. I know I have, just of talking to other people, hearing their lessons of going from, the student organization in the dorm rooms to a real business that's paying employees, and the lessons that are learned. And I personally have benefited so much from those relationships. And I mean, Ritika, I remember meeting you for the first time at Pendo and like finding out that you were a freshman with a venture. And like, I was just so excited to hear that there's other people doing that. And so platforms that really elevate those stories, I think is huge.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. I think for Seaver, what we would really love is, and this has been difficult in the pandemic, right? So that kind of casts a shadow over it. But I think, further opportunities to like meet and network with just other students who might or might not be interested, almost like the, what do we call it? Undiscovered luck, or the kind of random chance encounters of, oh, hey, I just met this person and it turns out they have skills or interests that really well align with what we do. Kind of in the Park program, we already have that in the Park lounges, which is really fantastic. I think depending on the major, depending on the program you're in, it's more or less difficult to have that in other contexts, in other areas, which would be really wonderful.
Yeah, I think also more opportunities for students to kind of leverage their work at Seaver. It's kind of hard for a sophomore or junior to kind of see that, okay, in Seaver, I'm going to have the ability to actually do technical work, which is sometimes very rare, but more opportunities to do this, like things like the CEI or get class credit for their work, because unfortunately, we're not at a point that we can pay them. And so kind of, and we're also competing for their talent and for their time. And so I think incentivizing students to do more service in general is something that NC State could really look into.
Yeah, I agree with everything just said. I think developing like the community even more to give us the opportunity to connect with other entrepreneurs, whether that's just NC State entrepreneurs, Park entrepreneurs, is really great, because just talking to other people who are in this kind of space is really helpful half the time. And then I think Hampton asked this question, and he had talked to me one time about an entrepreneurship peg, which I think could be really, really cool. So I like that idea you had talked to me about, Hampton.
And Margaret Borden is asking if any of you have tapped into K through 12 resources or given back to K through 12 through opportunities with your businesses. Specifically as a statistics teacher, she's wondering how Seaver could capitalize on students needing to collect data for their science classes and simultaneously learning from and having access to the data that they're working with.
I guess we can go because we were mentioned in there. But I think that's a great question. And to immediately answer, we have not tapped into those resources as much as I think we can or should have. But I think that is a great point. On the topic of, turning, shall we say, mistakes into new opportunities. For example, we recently bought quite a few of these devices called Raspberry Pis, which, if you don't know, are these kind of miniature computers. And for a number of reasons, we thought they would be very useful and necessary in some of our designs. And we bought them and they arrived, and it turns out they weren't useful at all. And at first, we were very disappointed in this, but I think there are a lot of possible educational opportunities and things like that too. Kind of generally what we do in Seaver, we use a lot of off-the-shelf parts. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for like engagement with kind of K through 12 resources, and possibly even, in K through 12 environments in some of the communities we're trying to serve.
All right, and Kelsey Norwood has written, have you been able to get class credit for any of the work you have done with your startups? And we can go from 321 Coffee through Sani.
Yeah, we have been, which has been really fortunate. So it's honestly been sort of like a hack, because we've been able to incorporate like 321 into some courses like as projects, as well as in a form of like an independent study or like an internship, where you're able to just commit that time fully to working on the company. And so typically that's looked like partnering with a faculty member on campus to create your semester goals. So it's not just like, yeah, go do whatever and like hopefully you do something, but it's really purposeful. There's usually objectives, there's milestones that you're expected to hit, as well as scheduled check-ins with that professor to make sure you're on the right track. And so that's been just like a great resource for us for accountability, for having the time in our day set aside to have like scheduled time for 321. So it's not just like, oh, I just finished my test and now I get to start doing some things. As well as, I personally am in the business school. Michael and Liam, at least on our team, they're more in the statistics and economics world. But I've been able to incorporate 321 into some of our class projects when we're doing marketing plans or financial modeling. Being able to use that 321 application has been such a great way to sort of get that class experience, but also value and benefit in the business.
And I think going off that, I think Liam and I both used 321 on like a couple of like different papers or whatnot for different classes. I know I wrote a paper in economics about the farmers market being like a localized monopoly because we were like the only coffee shop and option there. And I think Liam just wrote a paper on 321 this semester.
Yeah, I wrote a paper in economics about like allocation of opportunities for adults with disabilities. So it's been very cool to be able to like use our experience with like 321 Coffee and kind of mesh that with school and academics.
Yeah, Yeah, I think from the CBER side of things, Noah and I have not gotten any class credit, unfortunately, to work on CBER. I would really love to get class credit because a lot of the work we do is very technically rich and at times even more demanding than my technical classes. And so, but I think that speaks more about kind of engineering not really touching any of the other social issues, which is a completely different issue in itself. But we have found it really helpful to almost make a class for ourselves. So Fridays at 1, so we always work 1 to 4, and that's been really, really helpful for us. So treating it almost like a class and having due dates and, really putting that, prioritizing that, like Lindsay said, you don't finish your tests and then think about CBER. It really is something that we try to put on the same level as classes, and that doesn't always happen, but it's been really, really helpful this semester, and we've gotten a lot done. I think it's been one of our best moves as a company.
I'll also briefly add on to that. I saw Michael in the chat mentioned how 321 Coffee has done a few CEIs, and we have kind of followed in that. We started this as a CEI. We've now led 2 CEIs in addition this year. And for any of the current parks, it is really fun to do a CEI, especially if you figure out when you want to propose. And it's also really fun to lead one, which I didn't realize at first, but yeah.
Yeah, and I have not gotten class credit either, but I have some tips to learn from Lindsay. She had told me about the opportunities you can do. But I think what's really cool too is I am learning stuff that directly applies to Sani at the College of Textiles. So I'll take away key components of my fiber science class and then be able to figure out whether this fabric weighs more than the other by the feel of it and looking at the warp and weft direction. So I'm definitely gaining a lot of technical knowledge that I'm using to help grow Sani with my classes. So it really works out well because I kind of am working on my business while going to school.
Awesome. And you guys all touched on a lot of the technical skills that you've kind of taken away from being a student entrepreneur. Maybe some of you could speak about personal or character skills that you've learned along the way through the trials and tribulations of starting a business.
Yeah, I would love to share, but Michael and Liam, I'd love for you guys to share as well from 321. I would say personally, I've learned that it never hurts to ask, and you sort of never know what people are going to say yes to. And, in being young, being in the startup world, you got to make a lot of asks, and sometimes it can be a little, I don't know, disappointing because you get a lot of no's. But I found that a no is a no to the question you asked. So you just have to ask a different question. And being persistent and being creative. And it's oh, will you follow us on Instagram? No. Okay, what about Facebook? The more that you can ask, the more opportunities you have for a yes. And so I would say that's something that I've learned in entrepreneurship, but can totally be applied to other areas of life.
Yeah, I think definitely, I think that's a fantastic point. I think that's something we've experienced in CBER as well. I think in addition, personally for me, it has been being comfortable making decisions about things that I'm not an expert on in any sense of the word and may have not even taken classes on. And this can range from, technical decisions we'll be working on our device and then it's do we do A or B? And I don't know. So either I have to find the right person to ask to know, or make a decision based on the information we have, which, kind of coming from physics and math, right? Where it's there's an answer and you've got to go through, figure out, you have a procedure, boom, there's the answer. In this case, there's not, which was very uncomfortable at first, but, over time you get the hang of it and it's quite fun. I think in addition, we have found that it's kind of, it was at first a challenge to figure out how do we communicate and translate this interesting tech idea into something that's actually useful for real communities. But it's probably the most important thing that we can do because we're trying to avoid, in broad strokes, the kind of dystopian mega corporation model of other tech startups you may have heard of, and instead make something that's useful to real people and not just hey, what if we did this? which has been a continual learning process, but I think has been very valuable.
Yeah, kind of building off what Lindsay said, I think it's important to tell everyone you know what you're doing, because you never know who's going to know who, what resources they may have for you. So like, even if it's like someone's grandmother, tell her about like your business, because she may know someone that could help you out. And then another thing I have learned is that if it's meant to be, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And I think that's something really important with entrepreneurship, because sometimes people have this like glamorous picture that you're going to be your own boss, right? Like, so like you're in charge of what you do, like you can pick your schedule, but then also like you're also going to be working till 1 o'clock in the morning because you need to get something done. And like, it's you who needs to get it done. So I think those are two lessons that has definitely come about after building Sani and growing Sani.
And I'd like to add just something really quick. I don't know what you would really call it. I don't know if it's adversity or determination or being scrappy, but I think almost on a monthly, weekly, daily basis, Michael, Lindsay, and I are constantly needing to learn new things. I know we mentioned that none of us came from a coffee industry, so we had to learn how to brew a good cup of coffee, how to make a good latte. When we pivoted to roasting beans, we didn't know anything about how to roast a bean. We had to learn how to operate the machine, how to go about buying those beans. When we wanted to hire a new manager, we had to go through the process of figuring out how to be good interviewers, how to identify potential red flags, how to align our culture and find that in somebody that we were looking for. And so pretty much every day we're learning something new and something that we haven't learned in school. And I think it takes a lot of determination and being able to be scrappy to figure all of that out. And like Lindsay mentioned, sometimes you have to ask for help because you can't figure that out yourself. But I think that's like the biggest thing that I have learned since being a part of 321 Coffee.
Yeah, and to Liam's point, just like a good story about that. The night before we opened the operations at the farmers market, we were at the farmers market until probably 1 a.m, trying to figure out how to work the espresso machine that we had there and needed to know how to work for the next morning at like 8 a.m. So it was a lot of like sitting there watching videos and trying to extend that to like the machine that we had sitting in front of us. But I think that's also part of the fun of it.
And in terms of the business and legal learning curve, approaching entrepreneurship, what has that been like for you guys, especially for those of you who aren't business majors and perhaps had to kind of learn on the go?
Yeah, the legal stuff is definitely hard. And that's where, again, sort of that like just self-determination to figure it out. So reading those resources online, talking to people. Luckily, there's a few like Park alumni in law that have been able to help and willing to talk. There's some online on-campus legal resources. But it's just a series of asking questions, continuing to ask questions, continuing to read, watch YouTube videos, and just learn in as many different ways as possible, and hope that, if you can trust yourself to make the next best decision, even if it may, you could have done something better, as long as it's good enough, odds are nothing is that permanent, and you can always go back and change it.
I think another lesson for us has been that, at least in the food industry, there seem to be some like ambiguous questions as to like what you're supposed to do in certain situations. I know like we had a situation back in the fall where we had like the Food and Drug come out to inspect our space, and we heard like there was like one inspector that came out and they told us one thing, and then we like tried to call and get like clarification on it, and like someone else that worked in like the same department told us basically like a contradictory answer. And then it's like, okay, like we now have like these two pieces of information from like the same like what's supposed to be like legal entity, and like how do we like proceed like moving forward with that information, which I suppose is maybe a frustration with the system just as a whole.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of the challenge has been understanding almost the difference between what is expressly written and what's intended, especially around kind of conversations of legal documents. Like if I write XYZ in the NDA that we make, our non-disclosure agreement that we ask our volunteers to sign, what does that actually do? And that's been a combination of reaching out to alumni in the Park Network, and also sometimes, having to make that decision of like, look, we need this document now. How important is it actually that the wording is precisely correct, and or, are we fairly confident there will be some way to remedy any kind of catastrophic mistake we make if we do make that? Which again is kind of an uncomfortable feeling, but sometimes that's just what you got to do. I think in addition, sometimes we have kind of like literally run up against that curve. For example, when we're trying to estimate our budgets, we didn't realize we would have to pay a tariff on the electronics we were ordering, sometimes from China. And so, we order all this stuff, we spend all this money, we got all these cool parts, and then FedEx sends us like, hey, we want an extra $300. And I'm like, for what? And then it's going through all of the tariff regulation, being like, oh, okay, so this, that, the other thing, subsection, this applies. Eventually we figure it out, but it definitely makes kind of the initial steps feel a little more challenging than you kind of initially expected.
Yeah, and shout out to, there's a Duke Law Clinic that we got to participate in last year, unclear. Time is not a thing right now. But we got paired with like final year law students, and they kind of sat us down and they said, okay, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. Here's how you need to clean everything up. Here's how it needs to be. And that was incredibly helpful, because I think going into CVER kind of thought, okay, we're going to make the technology and the business stuff and the legal stuff will all just kind of work itself out because our technology is so great. This is not how you should go into starting a business. Excuse me, the legal and the business side of things take a lot of work, and it is worth it to put in that time and really understand and read the book and read the Google search and ask the lawyer all your stupid questions. My cousin's a patent attorney, and I'm texting him like every 5 minutes, like, hey, Mark, what does this word mean? Like, what is all of this? Like, what is happening in this document? And so you really need to be intentional about understanding everything from the get-go, especially, if you are connected with a university, because a lot of those kind of intellectual property and all of that kind of hairy legal stuff can be very complex very quickly in the university space.
Yeah, and I think the whole thing is that you don't have to know all the answers to these questions. And that's what mentors, family is for. So we got really lucky because my dad is also an entrepreneur. So when it came to like the basics of starting Sani, like how to file for an LLC, he was there to help us with that kind of thing. And we've also used different law clinics, like we used the Campbell Law Clinic and the UNC Law Clinic, I believe. And so going to people who know the answers is what you can do, and it's there for you to take advantage of it.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. And please join us tomorrow. The first session is at 11 a.m. and it's a book discussion with Candace Jackson. So thank you again to all the panelists.
A thunderous Zoom applause is coming through your screens right now. If you will take a look at your gallery view. Thank you so much to our student startup leaders for sharing your collective wisdom with us. And thank you very much, Bejul, for terrific moderation of our session tonight. And thank you to all of our attendees. And again, I'm going to give a special shout out and welcome to our 4 new class of 2025 scholars who are here tonight. We are all overjoyed to see you, especially jumping in and sharing your first day as Park Scholars, your first official event with us. So welcome to you all. Thank you again, as Bejul said. We'll see you in the morning, I hope, at 11 Eastern for a terrific session. We're going to talk about Stacey Abrams' book, Lead from the Outside. So I hope to see all of you in the morning. Thank you for a great first day.